Welcome to our 2016 series of the Overland Workshop. My name is Andrew St. Pierre White.
And I'm Paul Marsh.
Well, welcome to our campsite this morning on the...
He's trying. He's practicing.
I'm trying the click. We've been living all day with...
Notice I don't try.
No, you're wise. The Ngai Pans, far eastern Namibia. And on our second part of what we're doing this morning, we're going to talk about carrying fuel, handling and carrying fuel.
We've all had bad experiences.
Yes, last year carrying a, in Africa I like 1,000 kilometers, and I think that, I wouldn't say that 1,000-kilometer range is a minimum for Africa, but it's comfortable. 1,000-kilometer range is comfortable, and with this vehicle we've got 800, and we've decided we're going to carry a little bit more fuel.
We will, yeah, and a couple of cans.
So I bought a plastic can, brand new, didn't test it, silly boy, it leaked. And I put it in the back of the pickup canopy, and it just spilt, with the rough roads, and what a mess, what a stink.
Well, you know how diesel is so difficult to clean up.
It is
it's
so
difficult. Impossible. Makes you sick thinking about it.
So,
well, you see, the biggest challenge is, again, like you've got your water, you've got your fuel. You need to understand where you're going, how far you're going, and how much fuel you actually need.
Right.
So what people often do is they come along and they go, I want this massive fuel tank at the back, great, and I'll have another one, which is probably the original fuel tank, but they've forgotten about all the weight they're adding to the vehicle.
In terms of the weight of the fuel and the tank itself.
The tank itself is heavy.
They're very heavy.
You've put the tank up behind the rear axle,
and
most of your weight now you're carrying, because that's one of the places you can build a bigger tank. So you've got this massive weight behind the rear axle, plus you've got wheel carrier and spare wheels. So all this extra weight on the rear of the vehicle.
The worst place of it.
Totally.
Yeah.
So you really got to think long and hard about how you travel, what your needs are. And as much as we like 1,000 kilometers, we travel very differently from a lot of people. You can always add it later, but once you've bought it and put the tank on, you're unlikely to take it off for a different trip. So I sort of would often want to know how people are going to travel, where they expect to go, and then they can work within their fuel range. Now there are going to be times when you're not going to have enough fuel, like we don't have here. And as I've said, the safest way, or one of the solutions, is to take 2 jerry cans, fill them up with fuel, and yes, probably the best place to put them is on the roof, strapped down. Okay, either in a holder. I prefer not to have them in a holder, but if you do, that's fine. I like to strap them down because I don't use them often. And if I do use them up there, I prefer to have them as flat as possible so I get least wind drag. But the fact is that they're going to be up there for a very small time.
While they're heavy.
So
you're just going to fill them up for that piece where you need that extra range. The rest of the time they're empty, and they must be
exactly. And they can sit on the roof because they're bulky and often smelly if you haven't washed them down. To empty that into my fuel tank is a piece of cake.
You use the little
super siphon.
The little siphons.
Little siphons.
So little super siphons. It's a little tube. Literally, you just put it into the can, so the can stays on top of the roof. You put the tube in there, and you shake it madly.
Well, it's got a one-way valve.
It's got a one-way valve, and then the fuel flows down and then siphons out straight into the tank.
It saves
you don't even need
sucking. You know when you had to suck fuel?
No. I don't. No. It's a long time since I've done that, and I would never. Never
terrible.
mind.
It does work really well.
So you can get. So you leave the cans on the roof rack, and you get 95%. There's always a bit of a dregs in there.
There's half a cup.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not really an issue. You don't need to lug them up and down.
Well, you see, that's the thing, because jerry cans, everything on a trip that you're lugging around, you sit in a car for hours on end, you don't exercise your back, you then go and swing a 20-litre jerry can up onto the roof, and you put your back out. It just spoils your trip. So, most of what you're doing is if you're at a fuel station, you've got help, and you can fill it up, and you don't have to take it down to empty it into the car. So the real point of the matter is that taking that opportunity for that small amount of time you need, you can reduce the weight you're carrying at the rear, which is much better overall. If people could work on the premise of keeping your vehicle light, If you had to weigh every bit of kit you put on your vehicle, you'd be horrified at what you make it carry and what you expect the components to do. So the other options when you're building these fuel tanks, you need to again make sure that you find someone who's built tanks, understands how to build tanks, has been in the market a long time, and their tanks are well tested. Because the number of times that you come across a tank that's leaking, and it's not easy to seal a tank that's leaking. It's really difficult. Diesel's more difficult.
Yeah.
So, you have that problem. How do you do it? Now, when you're putting an extra tank in, there's always, how do you connect it into the vehicle system?
Right.
Now, some of the OE tanks, like you get on some of the Land Cruisers, have a twin tank system, a sub-tank. And that's fantastic. It's probably the best way to do it. You've got a switch, a little solenoid, and the fuel then draws the fuel from the rear tank, and the gauge, second gauge, shows how much fuel you've got in. One of the other ways to do it is to make a flow-through tank. So if you've got a smaller tank at the back, typically you can get a 75 or 80 litre tank, depending on the vehicle, at the back where the rear spare wheel would go. And then you make that flow into your main tank. So you're filling up from the original filler into your flow-through tank, which flows into the main tank. That means you use one fuel gauge, your original fuel gauge. It only means that it stays full for a lot longer. And not a bad way to do it. You've actually got that fuel on board. You're filling up 2 tanks. It's not a massive tank at the back. You haven't gone and put a 270 or 120 litre at the tank. You've put a 60 or 70 litre tank. It's extended your range nicely. So that's not a bad compromise. For most people, that would probably be adequate.
Right.
And if your tank is mounted again properly, and the piping that's used is good quality piping, and the clamps are used, and it's nicely done, properly done, you'll have no problems. But it's when tanks go in and they are compromised in the piping and the fittings, and then you're just asking for trouble along bad roads.
Yes. Your point about finding a company that has a long track record, I think, is absolutely vital. There was one situation, I saw a new company decided to go into tanks, and they weren't even using fuel-grade fuel pipes or petrol. Yeah. And of course, you've got to know this stuff.
Well, most people wouldn't know. They go to a fitment centre
and just say,
I need a tank.
Yeah.
And I think a large part of the problem that I find people have is they will go to a company, any fitment company, and there are some good guys around who do some very good work. But they don't all have the experience of lots of years of overland travel.
Of everything. And
totally.
Yes, okay.
So you will go there and you'll tell the person, I need a tank. And of course, if he's got a big tank in stock and it's more money for him, he'll sell you the big tank. Whereas if you actually understood what you knew and you could consult with people who had that experience to understand what you absolutely need. It's like building a house. You don't ask the builder what you want, you just consult with an architect who helps you design the house. And then from that point you go and sit with the builder and he builds your house. We just don't do that process with vehicles, but we should. Because that way you would probably, I know without doubt, actually you would definitely save a huge amount of unnecessary equipment bolted to your vehicle.
Yes.
And you would spec it much more accurately to what you need, save a heap of money, and spend that cash on travel. Much better. So, that's the fine line, is finding people who've got that experience, who can sit down with you, help you design your vehicle, spec it for the trip and travel. And of course you can always grow from that. Like you take your house, you extend your house, you add stuff to your house. It's identical to the same sort of process. But people don't do that. Walk into a fitment centre or a place and they just throw equipment at the truck without too much thought about what it's
I think a lot of this stems from the fact that a lot of 4x4 equipment centres don't differentiate clearly between off-road and overland.
Now that's a
So
very
they might have a
topic.
lot of, yes it is,
Yeah,
but
it's
they
a grey
might have
area.
a great deal of experience with off-road because they understand their suspensions and their bull bars and things. But when you're doing overland expeditions, it's a different subject actually.
Yeah.
So that you're basically saying that particularly for overland, well maybe for both, you need that specialist that understands probably more than most fitment centres do.
Well, so, a lot of fitment centres, the
more
owners of the
specialised.
fitment centres have got a lot of experience.
Yes, they have.
And that they've got, and I think it's really, it's about, like anything, the owner's got the experience, but then does the staff member you're talking to have that experience? And I think that's really what I'm saying.
You won't know.
You won't know.
necessarily.
You've got to ask. You've got to ask those questions.
Yeah.
You've got to look at it realistically and go, there's a lot of information on the internet, and unfortunately, it often confuses people. People would come and sit down, and I'd say to them, "What have you read up? And we've got these lists, and the list is a long list." And I'm going, well, we're going to start taking stuff off this list because you don't need all this. But all the information from the internet, everyone's got their own experience. It doesn't make it wrong. Does it make it right for your predicament or your situation or what you need? That's the hard part. You need someone to discern that information and to sift through and go, that's what you need for your trip. You know only too well. You've done a lot of this too.
I avoid forums like the plague. But, I mean, forum can be really good and really terrible.
Yeah.
And unless you know, you won't know if the advice you're being given is really good or really terrible. And I've read things that make me, I can't believe what I'm reading, and this is proper advice. But yet again, there's a lot of good stuff and a lot of good experience. How do you discern? You can't.
This is what I'm saying. I'm going back to the point that it is very difficult, for someone to discern if you don't have that knowledge. So I think the important thing is, you have to think about what do you want out of your vehicle, and not just walk into a place and start throwing kit on the vehicle because it looks good or you think you should have it. I've always said take more experience and take less equipment. It's very wise that. It was taught to me by someone a long time ago, and I thought, that's it. Take more experience, learn how to do without, and you will find you probably don't need half the kit you take, which makes your vehicle lighter, makes all the components more reliable, means you don't struggle through different places you're going to. And really what we're trying to do, we're trying to go to the bush, to go back to a simple way of living and experience which we cherish. But if you take the kitchen sink and everything else with you, you might as well have stayed at home.
But a lot of people like to do that.
Nothing wrong with taking some nice comforts.
No, there's nothing wrong with
I think there's a lot to be said for that.
I agree. Why be uncomfortable?
Yeah,
there's no reason to be
and
uncomfortable.
some of the designs that guys have got are clever designs, and I really look at them and I think, wow, that's fantastic, and it's nicely built into vehicles. So,
Any more on the fuel? I think we've covered it.
Well, the other thing on the fuel I always say to people is fuel gets into the tank. Now, before it even gets into the tank, most of our problems with fuel start by bad fuel in the pump. If you can recall, we went to a very smart fuel station and picked up fuel, and it cost us dearly.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you've got to make sure that before it gets out the tank, out of the pump, into your tank, there's two ways that I would say to people to do that. One is you can get a funnel which separates water and fuel and a bit of sediment. It's made by Mr. Funnel, and it's a great bit of kit. You can get different sizes. The other is to actually get a glass jar, very simple. Ask your attendant to put some fuel in, check the coloration, check for any sediment, and actually dip your finger in and just feel that it is actually diesel. What you would be surprised how many people have put petrol into their cars. You go into a country like China, it's very difficult to discern between petrol and diesel and how you pronounce it. And I've had experience where people have done exactly that in China.
Okay.
And so, that's really sad. Once you've done that, you've made a big mistake. It's a big headache to sort out. So that will mean that you've got a clear chance to decide whether this fuel going into your tank is good or bad. And if you're looking in the funnel or the bottle and it doesn't look good, stop, find another pump. It's much better to do it then, to leave it and then have it in your tank, and then it's going in through your system, and then you have the problems. After it's gone into the tank and you're content with that, it's going to go into the engine bay, and then you can put a really good type of pre-filter. I use the Raycor filter. It's a good brand. There are a number of other different ones. I like a filter that is in the engine bay that I can see the fuel, because if I've got a problem, I've got a glass bowl of sorts that I can actually look at, and it allows me to make a decision quickly.
Diagnostic right away.
Straight away.
Yeah.
Before I've even done anything.
In our situation last year would have been
Great. We didn't have that,
Okay, so now here's the question though. What kind of traveller would you say you really need a extra fuel filtration system? Because I've never had one in any of my vehicles.
It's not to say you're going to have the problem though. You might get away with it and never have one, and you'll turn around and say, well, why do I need one?
I've had two situations with fuel problems. Yeah. One with a petrol Land Rover, and we did this amazing long trip, car ran superbly the whole way, and we were literally 2 hours from home, and it started chugging, and I remember thinking, that's fuel, and I limped home, and it was some bad fuel, and the year before last, the two of us, only time. So I consider myself fairly advanced overland travel, not extreme, but I know I've done some things, and I don't know if I need one. Do I need one?
Well, you know what I would do if you're planning not to spend the cash? You can get plastic inline fuel filters. And if you look at the size of hose, you can get, I think, an 8mm inlet. So basically it's a plastic filter, and you look at it, it's the biggest bore you can get is for diesel.
I carry those.
And carry a few of those.
I carry those in my spare suit.
Yeah, and the worst scenario is you can bypass your fuel filter, which is now blocked up. You can put that on, and you can carry on going, and you can throw them out as you go. It's a simple solution. It costs pence. But if you don't do that, and you don't carry a spare filter, you're going to be stuck high and dry.
So my question was, do I need to spend quite a bit of money to do an extra, double up on my fuel filtration system under the engine bay? And you're really saying, probably not.
You don't, but it's like anything. It's an extra insurance.
Yeah.
So if you choose to do it because you know it's peace of mind, and people have different levels of risk that they want to take.
I like the glass bowl idea, to be able to just look and say,
brilliant.
Aha,
and also for me, although you might not have done it, it means that I'm confident there's a lot less impurities going into my injection pump, which could cause premature wear.
Long-term wear.
So you might get away with it, but you won't know how much damage it's doing.
No, you won't.
The water and all.
You have no idea.
So, if I can reduce the amount of water going into my fuel, what you can't ever know is sometimes the guys mix paraffin into the fuel. I've had fuel in Iran where the fuel we put in was terrible. It looked like dark Coca-Cola. It was that bad. And within 1,000 kilometers, my oil had gone black. And I changed my oil ever so quickly, because the amount of unburned fuel into my engine and going in, and you could feel it. The car wasn't running properly. It was just, we had picked up black market fuel. We had no choice, and it was terrible. But I knew, we were going to run that fuel through, and I judged my oil color. I serviced the car, and then of course I saw the oil went black very quickly, which told me that there were a lot of impurities from the fuel unburnt going straight back into running around my engine.
Okay, yeah.
So I look for telltales.
It's interesting that you should talk about the black fuel thing, and it is contamination. That's what it is. It's contamination.
Well, it's going
of the
to go black anyway.
It's going to go black anyway, but my history of diesel engines, it goes black in a day. With South African diesel.
So you see, that's a lot of the oil going black is the impurities of the unburned fuel.
Yes.
And that's
what I'm saying.
Oil is pretty good these days.
Yes.
And I always say to people, when you're loading the vehicle up, and the manufacturers say 10,000 kilometers, to changing it every 5,000 k's is being kind to your vehicle, and oil doesn't cost a lot. And the same at changing your fuel filter. So, we are driving and picking up fuel all around. Most fuel these days is pretty good. Most tanks are pretty good. But even like we did last year at pretty much a new fuel station, picked up a bad fill of fuel, all that muck went through the engine, to a degree. So really what we're trying to say is, if you can eliminate by keeping filters clean, as clean as you can, clean fuel in your tank, and a way of telling if there's a problem before it actually becomes a real issue, you save yourself a lot of headaches.
Good. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Excellent.
Did you enjoy that? Then please subscribe. If you'd like to take our relationship to the next level from just $1 a month to support my productions, or if you'd like to download everything I've ever made, go to forexoverland.com.